So this is a story from Scotland. Janet had heard all of the warnings. Do not stray from the path. Do not talk to strangers. Beware of wolves. And one specific warning offered by her father: do not, do not, do not go into Carterhaugh. Well, when Janet was young, just a child, she couldn't go anywhere without a nurse, so her entire world was just the house and the surrounding gardens. But as time passed, Janet was becoming a young woman, approaching her 18th birthday, and like many young women, she was eager to step into womanhood. And her step into womanhood would also be, she planned, a step into Carterhaugh. Oh, she had heard things, not from her father. Whenever she asked her father, she was met with stony silence. But she had heard things from the servants, from the knights, from the ladies. It seemed that Carterhaugh had belonged to her father or his father before him, and now to her. And through some devious dealings, it had been stolen from them. She intended to take it back. And so the day of her 18th birthday, there was a grand party. And the next morning, Janet wrapped herself in her green cloak and headed for Carterhaugh. What she saw was a surprise. She had been led to believe that it would be a dark and foreboding place with a harsh wind and a path that was strewn with sharp rocks, and that there would be skeletal trees that would reach out to tangle her hair and scratch her skin and pull at her clothing. What she found was something quite different. A beautiful path, soft and lined with grass and moss, large trees in every possible hue of green, and near an ancient well, roses. On that midsummer's day, so many roses, beautiful, beautiful roses in creamy white and gentle pink and, oh, red as fire, red as blood. Janet saw a particularly beautiful rose. She could not resist. She plucked it. She stripped the stem of its thorns and she tucked it into her bodice. And when she looked up, he was there. Tam Lin. She had heard about him. She had heard that if anyone went into Carterhaugh, that they never came back. Or if they did, it would be only after they had paid a price, something of value. Well, said Janet, greetings. And the man, shimmering and so handsome, he said, what is your business here? You must leave at once. I must leave at once? And who are you to tell me that I must leave at once? I am Tam Lin, and surely you know that this is the territory of the Fairy Queen. And as the Fairy Queen's own man, I command you to leave. And who are you? I am Janet, and this is my father's land and mine, and my father's father before him and his father's father before him. I intend to take back this land. And so they stood for several moments staring at each other. And finally, they both looked down. Well, as I said, Janet had heard that no one leaves Carterhaugh without paying a price. Later that afternoon, she did leave, and she had given him neither ring nor necklace, and yet she had paid the price, and willingly too. The next morning, Janet's footsteps and her heart led her back into Carterhaugh. And after that, any time that she could get away, she was there with Tam Lin. After several weeks, it became clear to Janet that she was with child. And after a few more, it became clear to her father as well. He summoned her, furious. Janet, who has done this thing? This thing, father? This thing? Yes, which of my knights? None of your knights, father. Then who? That I will not say. Well, no matter, Janet. Many of the knights around here are beholden to me, and you are not so ugly that it will take much to convince one of them to take you as wife. No, father, no. And Janet turned and ran from the hall and into Carter Hall, where she found a Tam Lin. Surely we are meant to be together. What must we do? Oh, Janet, we are meant to be together, but it is not as simple as that. There is something that I did not tell you. As the Queen's own man, I have been pledged to do all she asks and to be in thrall to her. Every 10 years, she must pay a tithe to hell, a human sacrifice. And as I have been her favorite for these many years, I have been spared. But now her heart and her eyes have favored another, and I feel certain that this Midsummer's Eve, I will be the sacrifice. Midsummer's Eve, she said. Then we haven't much time. What can we do? First he said there was no way possible, no way at all. And then he said, well, there may be one thing, but it will be difficult, perhaps impossible. Tell me what it is. I will do it. I will. He said, well, on Midsummer's Eve, there will be a fairy procession. And if you can hide somewhere near the well, the fairy queen will be there with all of the fae folk. You must let the first horse, a black horse, coal black, go by. And when you see a brown horse, let it go by as well. But if you see a white horse with a rider, masked of course, but with one hand gloved and one hand bare, that will be me. Hold me down from the horse and hold me fast. Janet smiled. Hold you fast, that will be a pleasure. Perhaps another time it would be, said Tam Lin, but not that night. For I will not be myself, Janet. I will be transformed, and some of the transformations may be frightening or dangerous. But if you can hang on until you find yourself holding a red-hot iron bar, then plunge it into the well, and it may be that the spell could be broken. I will do it, she said. I will. I love you. And they parted with a kiss. But whether it was a kiss for the past or the future, they could not be certain. When Midsummer's Eve came, Janet wrapped her green cloak about her, and she headed for Carter Hall. She hid in the bushes near the ancient stone well, and she waited. And finally, the sound of horns and jingling bells let her know that the procession would begin. And there it came, the fairy queen on a coal-black horse. Janet waited and watched. And then a brown horse, but Janet waited and watched. And finally, as she watched, a white horse with a rider, masked, and with one hand gloved and one hand bare, she sprang from her hiding place and she pulled on the bridle and pulled the rider down. And as she held him, it was her own Tam Lin, but only for an instant. For then she found herself clutching an eagle, cawing and scratching at her with its talons. And then an enormous snake writhing and hissing. And then a lion roaring. Janet held on until she found herself holding a red-hot iron brand. She could feel the skin on her arms blistering, and she turned and threw the red-hot iron brand into the well, and the water hissed, and the steam rose, and then up out of the well rose her own Tam Lin. She wrapped her cloak around him, and together the two of them turned to face the fairy queen. The fairy queen looked at Tam Lin with fury in her eyes. Tam Lin, she said, I would not have guessed that you would have betrayed me in this way. Had I known what you would do, I would have plucked out your heart and replaced it with a heart of stone. I would have plucked out your eyes and replaced them with eyes of wood. And then her gaze changed from fury to regret. She raised her staff, and the entire procession turned around and went back into the woods. And Janet and Tam Lin walked back to Janet's father's house. Janet introduced Tam Lin to her father and told him the story. He could scarcely believe his ears. It was unbelievable. But what was believable was what he saw with his eyes, for he saw the deep bond between Janet and Tam Lin. And so Janet and Tam Lin were married the next day. And in the years to come, they built a grand house in the very heart of Carterhaugh. And there they raised children. And the land belonged to Janet and Tam Lin and their children, and their children's children, and their children's children's children for many hundreds of years. And that is the story of Janet and Tam Lin.